Welcome back, everybody, to another week of the RoboTaxi Report. To start off, again, we're looking at the FSD Beta Community Tracker. Your way to get involved if you have the beta to help us log all of the trips that we're all doing throughout the United States and parts of Canada to paint a better picture for how the beta is performing. Elias has been working very hard to gather all the information from the current 81 testers and present it here on the dashboard. If you click on the link and check it out, you can examine different areas to get a better look at what's going on. While keeping in mind that more is better, you can see how far the beta goes before disengaging, whether critical or simple. Critical meaning something safety related, and simple being something akin to a map error or just a simple decision issue. I strongly encourage you to get involved if you have the beta and help us gather even more info. So last week, we got our first look at 10.11.2's performance regarding RoboTaxi trips, or trips where a customer is getting from A to B with zero intervention. It was a wonderful surprise to see such an improvement over even 10.8.1 after such a drawback with 10.10.2. Now with 2 weeks of data, we can see how 10.11.2 is performing with a better understanding of its limitations. It's important to note that for this week I changed up my drive settings, so in the past I've been using what I've called chill squared, which is drive mode chill, beta mode chill, and that's how I've been running since 10.8.1. This week, however, with this second week of data, I've decided to change it up to chill drive mode average beta to see if there's any notable change. As you can see with the 2 weeks on 10.11.2, there is no significant change in the results as compared to the drive change I've made, but it is important to know exactly what I'm doing differently or the same, that way we can get a better picture of things going forward. I said on the last episode that I don't think we'll get to north of 80% reliability until we have a stack merge, and I believe after one more week of solid testing, we'll have a really good idea for the local maximum for 10.11.2. I'm suspecting it's going to sit right around 65 to 67%. It can be difficult to intuit the limitations of the system day to day, because on some days my reliability will be up over 80%, and then other days it'll be down closer to 40-50%. That's why it's good to look at this week to week, because it gives the sample size a chance to become more robust and representative of the system as a whole. In some areas where I drive, it's very easy for the system to complete trips, and in other areas it's almost impossible. It's important to keep in mind that I am working all over San Diego, and sometimes up in the LA or Temecula regions. So you can basically pick 2 points in any spot on that map, and that could be a random route that my car is running. So after another week or two of information, we'll have the limits ironed out. Moving into our city versus highway disengagements, I plotted the last 7 days of driving, and we can see that this graph is getting a little out of hand. This is literally a day-to-day chart over these last 41 days of testing. And this is a good example of the highs and lows in those different areas where I drive. To better make sense of this crazy graph, what I've done next is simplified all of these individual points to averages over every 5 days. Now with that, you can see a much clearer trend or projection for these lines, indicating the performance changes from 10.8.1 on the left to 10.10.2 in the middle, and to now with 10.11.2 to the far right. This is a great way to illustrate the changes that are happening and why 10.11.2 is such a big difference from 10.10.2. The only reason the highway disengagements tick up so violently around 0.7 is due to the testing on Friar's Gauntlet. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. The system gets completely beat up by the course in 3 straight laps, showing that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. Now I'm revisiting that same test later this week with the results of the poll coming in showing a landslide victory for the drive mode standard with beta assertive. So make sure you get subscribed so you'll see the notification for that video popping up later this week. A couple of episodes back, I referenced an FSD Beta tracker that my friend Ben developed to help me log my trips and to visualize what's happening with my car specifically over time. What you're looking at here is a graph of the simple versus critical disengagements on city streets in all conditions day and night. The gray portion of the graph are simple, meaning non-safety threatening or damaging disengagements. This can be anything from maps to basic system limitations to construction areas or simple decision-making problems that result in me taking over not because of a safety concern, but more so an inconvenience or an incorrect movement. Critical is far more important. Those are the dangerous disengagements that could end in injury or damage or worse. And as you can see here, that red line has gone down so far relative to simple that it's hard to really see any change toward the end. Now what you're seeing here is the same graphing but on the highway in all conditions. And the point to where those critical disengagements are maxing out is right at the end of 10.10.2. It's cool to see that over time, since about February, the simple disengagements on the highway have come down quite drastically, but it's even better to see that the critical disengagements, the safety concerns, are sharply coming down with 10.11.2. These are definitely trends going in the right direction, and hopefully we see this continue in future updates. Moving forward with another week of disengagements and interventions, you can see that the intervention number has increased over last week, even though disengagements have come down. It's a little early to say if I can attribute that to the change in my drive settings being chill beta average, but it is something to consider. This week we're in now, I'm going to complete on chill average to make sure that I have enough information to compare with chill squared. The week following this, I will revert back to chill squared to see how the numbers look after that. It is refreshing, however, to see the disengagements are still showing a decrease. Now, as we take a look at the causation donut, it's been brought up by longtime viewers like Chris P that there's a lot more information that should be pointed out or garnered from this image. I'm continually trying to refine the way I represent this information, so I'm making changes to the categories and such to better explain what's happening. D&E is decision-making and execution. This is quickly highlighting the majority of the problem with the vehicle and comes down to basic decision-making. So all 16 of these disengagements are due to bad choices. Choosing to get into the wrong lane, thus missing a turn, choosing to turn the wrong direction, choosing to pull forward during an unprotected left scenario or a right on red, and then not committing, so I have to take over to avoid a critical scenario. As you can imagine, bad choices, decision-making, and execution could encompass a lot of what you're seeing on your screen, but what you're seeing represented here as D&E are the simple issues. They're not safety concerns, they're typically what were included in the navigational category in previous causation donuts. And I noticed when I separated into maps, that no longer encompassed all of the maneuvering and decision-making qualities of the system. When it comes to maps, it's a simple issue where the navigation on the screen or the route your car is trying to follow doesn't match reality. This is arguably not a fault of the system, but it is a concern when considering trying to get to your destination or looking forward at transportation as a service with customers. If the map data is not accurate and the vehicle can't get them where they need to go, that's a problem. Hopefully, Tesla can get more involved with the information they gather and help update these maps or figure out a way to navigate around this issue, pun intended. System limit, like last time, is basically things a car is not allowed to do yet or is limited by Tesla. This includes U-turns, operating in heavy rain, as well as some scenarios where you have to tap the accelerator to let the vehicle continue. In the 2 weeks that I've been testing 10.11.2, I have had perfect weather. I haven't had any rain at all. So far, all of these disengagements are in a dry and clear climate with a lot of traffic. System error is becoming annoyingly more common on this build, and most of you would recognize this anytime your car throws up the red hands and forces you to take over immediately, usually to follow with autopilot disabled due to system error. This is very annoying when it happens, and it leaves you wondering what's going on. Are the two software stacks on top of one another and there's a miscommunication or something happening between them? It's really hard to say, but this is unfortunately quite a bit more common than I would expect. Before with the causation donut, I was using the term unsafe, and I didn't like that. It was too vague, and a lot of those unsafe decisions naturally would fit in the decision and execution category, but I want to separate out the importance of safety or accident avoidance disengagements. This is another thing that Chris P brought up that's a really good point. It's good to see what is actually a safety threat or a problem that could lead to damage, injury, or death. It's really important to note here that all 5 of these critical disengagements happened on the Gauntlet, on the 3-lap challenge that beat the system up. None of these have taken place on my other trips, especially with customers. It's rather surprising that in the 2 weeks that I've been on 10.11.2, that this was the only time there was a critical disengagement with a safety concern. So that is a very promising point of information to realize, that while we still have annoyances and disengagements, so far in my testing, I haven't had any safety threat level disengagements. Now again, I am one person of over 100,000, as we know now, in one area, so I cannot speak for everybody, and I'm sure at scale there are a lot more critical disengagements. But what I've noticed on my end is that there is a massive decrease, and that this point of datum is going in the right direction. Having just gone over the critical disengagements, safety concerns, it's important to distinguish the difference between human-caused and general safety concerns through critical. What I mean by human-caused disengagements is that in some cases, I'm sure everyone can imagine points where another car has come up behind you so quickly getting over that they effectively cut you off from being able to get into the turn lane you need, and you would have to hit your brakes, wait for them to pass, and then get behind them. This metric, in a large way, has a lot to do with etiquette on the road. The pedestrian side stems more from people who might be waiting to cross the street or are literally standing like on the road portion next to a crosswalk instead of on the sidewalk like they should. The autopilot system will not proceed in those cases for me. It just sits there because because it's not going to risk a critical scenario, a safety scenario. So while thankfully rare, it is still a problem that other humans interfere. So annoying, but a very small portion of the overall disengagements. So far, illegal and construction have been rather low. I imagine construction's going to pick up quite a bit. I've just been fortunate that a lot of my trips haven't taken me through dense construction areas. But if you're familiar with San Diego, there is no shortage of construction anywhere you go. But on the legal standpoint, this is mostly just talking about obeying traffic light laws. A lot of the legal disengagements that do come will more often than not come from not being able to read a no turn on red. And while I would categorize that as a system limit because it can't read those signs yet, it's enough of a concern in the legal sense that it's going to go into the legal category. So some of these might overlap, but they're important enough to separate to really see what's going on. The other big thing that pops out in my mind for legal is, turning into oncoming traffic or crossing the yellows into oncoming traffic. Things that are just obviously wrong and illegal and dangerous. And I don't really need to linger on construction. That's pretty obvious. To wrap up, there's a few things I noticed in this last week that I thought were worth mentioning. There are some improvements that are really a big deal here. Proper lane change execution around intersections. I've noticed in my car that it hasn't changed lanes in the middle of an intersection. Like you're crossing the middle of the intersection through a light. My car is now waiting until it's crossed through to actually change lanes versus changing in the middle of it, which is not good. And on top of that, the second one's a really big deal. Proper lane selection after turning. All too often, when you have a very quick succession of left to right turns, your vehicle has to jump over several lanes to get to that other turn in time. On previous builds, it's always turned right into the immediate lane and then has to go through each lane change to try to get to that other turn lane in time, and it doesn't. You have to take over, otherwise you'll miss your turn. This build, while not perfect, is properly jumping lanes to get into the proper turn lane safely. Now, it doesn't do this jump if you're in a double left scenario. I mean, it'd be pretty bad if it did, because then you could be getting into someone else's lane. This is specifically talking about single left turn lanes, turning onto a road that has 2, 3+ lanes to take a right turn very quickly afterwards. So far, it's working quite well. I'd say more than 50% of the time, the car is actually able to jump all the way over to the proper lane and then make the next turn, or at least the lane right before it, and then only has to change lanes once, which is a massive improvement over having to individually cross each lane that likely has other cars that have already made that jump like we would in the first place. So massive props for this improvement. I know it has a lot to do with the confidence of the neural net and knowing its plan and its route and how to execute it. On the other side, there are some very obvious concerns. So in San Diego, there are a lot of areas where there's like a cluster of those little scooters that people ride around all over downtown, Lyft, Bird, Uber scooters, whatever. I'm sure you guys have seen them in your own cities. Well, we have several areas all through downtown, which is one of the reasons the beta does so poorly downtown, but also in areas like Mission Beach and Pacific Beach. And these clusters of scooters and their little parking spot on the road cause the beta to freak out every time and abruptly swerve like it's trying to dodge a person. This is a problem. I caught it briefly today when we were going around a group of scooters, and it projected the scooters as this massive box, almost looking like the back of a semi-truck, but a very stubby box-looking truck. I'm hoping that I can capture this on my cameras to actually show you an example, but without fail, every time we come up to one of these little groupings of scooters, the car will swerve to the left to get around them. And hopefully this is something that is caught and fixed rather quickly, because this is definitely a repeating disengagement scenario for me, and frankly unnecessary. The scooters aren't jutting out toward the car, they're well within their spot. It's just something the system hasn't identified properly and thinks it's a concern and tries to maneuver away from it. I suppose that's better than hitting something, but in this case, it's more of a problem than a good thing. And then, as I alluded to with the Causation donut, there seems to be a lot more system error issues. I'm having several areas around San Diego and Carlsbad and such where I'll just randomly be kicked out of autopilot. I'll get the red hands, it'll say autopilot disabled due to system error, and then sometimes I immediately have it back. Sometimes it takes a screen reset. Prior to getting 10.11.2, I actually had to recalibrate my cameras to get my autopilot to work again. So with all that being said, this could just be my car. I've got nearly 200,000 kilometers, over 120,000 miles on it. It could be my car. Let me know if any of you are having an increase in these system error issues as well, where you're just losing beta or losing autopilot. Even if you don't have beta, some of you might have had this issue. But thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the RoboTaxi Report. Please, like always, leave all your comments and suggestions and ideas down below. I try to take note of all the suggestions I get so I can adapt and improve this and get even more useful information. And it would be incredible if you would like this, share it with friends and family, post it anywhere you can think, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, all the above, so that this information, this data can get to more eyes, and maybe more people can get involved in collecting this information and joining that community tracker. That way we can keep a close eye on how the system's doing over time. I'm really excited for 10.12 around the corner and eventually the stack merge. And now it's time for me to get back out there and continue collecting that information. So you guys take care, and I'll see you on the next video.